Hello and welcome to BYJU'S IAS. Let's begin today's session of comprehensive news analysis from the Hindu newspaper with the first article today that talks about the National Family Health Survey, the fifth installment of which came out very recently. The author here, who is a professor at Center for Community Medicine at AIIMS Delhi, says that the NFHS, that is the National Family Health Survey, provides an incredible source of information for the policymakers and for the researchers in India. But at the same time, there needs to be certain changes made in this particular survey. Essentially, as per the author, the survey is too bulky, has a lot of questions which are repeated in other similar surveys as well. So, the government and the concerned agencies would do well to shorten up the survey, make the questions much more relevant, and avoid repeating questions in the other surveys as well to get the most valid information. The author here says that the survey provides an openly accessible data to the policymakers as well as to the Niti Aayog, which has to make various rankings for different states and districts across the country. It is an extremely large survey conducted in a representative sample of households throughout the country. The survey started in 1992-93 and is usually conducted in a period of about 4 to 5 years. For instance, the fourth round of the survey was conducted in 2015 and 16, and the fifth round was conducted in 2018-19. So there is not a very clear cut gap. The first round came up in 1992-93, while the second round of the survey was conducted in 1998-99. Right now, the survey provides district level information on a lot of key indicators such as fertility, child mortality, contraceptive practices in India, reproductive and child health, nutrition, and the quality of health services as provided to the citizens of India. Most of the people who are covered under the survey are women in the reproductive age of 15 to 49 years along with their husbands. This recent survey numbers covered 6,36,699 household and about 7.24 lakh women as compared to just over 1 lakh men across the country. In one of the earlier CNAs also we had discussed the key findings of the survey and how India's fertility rate is declining at a much faster pace as compared to what we had assumed earlier. This article, however, focuses on a different aspect about the survey. Now, this entire survey exercise cost close to 250 crore rupees to be conducted entirely. Now, where exactly does this money come from? This money comes from multiple sources, including the United States Agency for International Development, also known as the USAID, the Department for International Development, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, UNICEF, the United Nations Population Fund, and our Union Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. Now, many people argue because most of the funding is coming not from the government coffers but from international sources, the government wants to expand the scope of this survey and gather as much information as possible because it is coming at the cost of someone else's money. That is why over the years the scope of this survey has been expanded. Now the survey also includes questions regarding HIV, other non-communicable diseases such as blood sugar, hypertension, vitamin D3 deficiency, etc. While the fourth installment of the survey had 74 questions, which in itself was a pretty long questionnaire, the fifth survey was even longer. Now, just imagine asking so many questions to a population of about 10 lakh people. This is an enormous task and is usually outsourced to different agencies. For example, when you go for your enrollment of Aadhaar card, the UIDAI has outsourced the work to multiple agencies to collect the data for Aadhaar. These agencies are paid for every Aadhaar enrollment. They collect the data and then they submit it with the UIDAI. It's outsourcing that is happening. Similarly, this survey also is conducted by various private agencies who are given this work by the ministry in return for a certain fee. The problem is when you outsource this work to multiple agencies, there is no uniformity in the standard of work. The data that is collected by the multiple agencies can be very different from each other, and there is no assurity whether or not the right answers are being filled in the survey. As I said earlier, the author says that apart from the National Family Health Survey, There are other kinds of surveys also which are conducted by the Health Ministry in India. This includes the National NCD Monitoring Survey, the National Mental Health Survey, the Global Adult Tobacco Survey, and many more. The problem that the author here has is that these surveys have some questions which are common with the National Family Health Survey. This means that there is duplicacy of work and the government is just wasting its resources and money by asking the same question to the same people just in different survey forms. The responsibility to ensure that such surveys have proper questions is on the Department of Planning, Statistics and Program Monitoring. However, their approach has been questionable. On the other hand, the people who argue that no, the National Family Health Survey should not be cut down say that while all other surveys are fine, but it is only the National Family Health Survey which is conducted regularly without any lapse in between. Also, they say that the target audience of different surveys are different. So even if the same questions are asked, we are still getting different informations. The article points out that while the National Family Health Survey is a good indicator since it has put a lot of data in the public domain, but we should not be overtly dependent on one single survey to provide us all the different types of public health data. We need to identify a set of national level indicators, and that should be done using the funds of the national government at a regular level. So the author in the suggestions says that rather than having one big national family health survey, let's have three different surveys. For example, let's have one survey which focuses on reproductive and the child health issues. Second survey that focuses on the behavioral surveillance part of it, such as the problems of HIV, water sanitation and hygiene, etc. And let's have a third survey that focuses on nutrition, biological aspect of it, and collects data on problems such as blood pressure, blood sugar, serology, etc. We can have these surveys in a period of 3 to 5 years, and that will give us a much more dependable data because that is essential for policy making. So, in short, the important pointers are the National Family Health Survey is good, important, but the government is kind of misusing it and not really getting the best out of it because the government is thinking that the money to conduct this survey is anyways coming from outside. So, let's just continue with whatever is happening. Secondly, it is too bulky, it has too many questions. These questions should be divided into different surveys, and there can be three different surveys conducted focusing on specific aspects of social issues. Thirdly, the survey being conducted by the agencies and the agents should also be trained to properly collect the data so that the quality of data is not compromised. Now, let's go beyond the article and see a few important aspects of the National Family Health Survey number 5. As I said in one of the earlier discussions also, we focus on the key findings of this survey, mainly about the declining fertility rate in India. But let's focus on some other aspects. There were three major headlines that were made by the findings of this survey. First major headline was that India's fertility rate is declining, which is good news, indicating that our population growth rate will come down. The second headline was about sex ratio. For the first time ever, as per this survey, there are more than 1,000 women in India for every 1,000 men. In fact, the survey says that there are 23 states and union territories where the sex ratio is over 1,000. The third key headline of the survey was that India is still facing issues in fighting the problem of anemia, and the children are worst hit. As you can see in the finding of the fifth installment of National Family Health Survey, 59% women in India are still suffering from anemia, 67% children, and 25% men. In fact, these numbers are only increasing as compared to the past years. Let's look at the key takeaways from this survey, both in the positive side also and in the negative side as well. On the positive side, as I said, the total fertility rate is declining, especially in the urban areas. Women are also getting more autonomy. As per the fifth installment of the survey, over 43% women in India now own a house or a land alone or jointly. This number was just 38.4% in the last survey. The number of women operating a bank account have also increased. Not just this installment of the survey also gives us data on lifestyle diseases which are increasing in India at a rapid pace, such as the issues of blood sugar, hypertension, etc. However, the report also highlights certain concerns, such as the overall economic situation amongst women has not improved significantly. The number of women who claim that they have gone out of their houses to work in the past 12 months is still only 25.4% as compared to 24.6% in the survey that was conducted 5 years back. Not just this, we have also not performed very well on nutrition schemes, and the health insurance coverage in India is still covering only 41% of the Indian households. The experts also say that while the number on sex ratio may be good news, but experts don't really agree to this. Experts say that the sample size of the National Family Health Survey is so little that it might not give us the exact number on the sex ratio. We would rather depend on the census to provide us an exact number on the sex ratio part. In the earlier discussions, when we discussed about this survey, we talked about how the government of India is trying to fight the issue of anemia, which is essentially a condition where there is a lack of iron in the body. The government of India has started the Anemia Mukt Bharat strategy, which we discussed in that video. I suggest you to revise that as well. The next article that we have for you today talks about the delimitation process as it is going on in Jammu and Kashmir for the past few years. It is in the news now because the Delimitation Commission has finally given its report. The Delimitation Commission has suggested that there should be 6 more assembly seats given to the Jammu segment, which increases the seat from 37 to 43, while on the other hand, there should be 1 more seat given to the Kashmir part. So the number of seats from Kashmir part should increase from 46 to 47. The commission also said that our report of deciding the number of seats is not just based on population. It is also based on other factors such as inadequate communication, lack of public conveniences due to their excessive remoteness, and inhospitable conditions on international borders. This report of the Delimitation Commission has seen a lot of protests from the local parties in Jammu and Kashmir, especially in the Kashmir area. The reason is that this indicates a shift in the political power from Muslim region, that is the valley or the Kashmir area, to a Hindu dominated region, which is the Jammu area. The Delimitation Commission was constituted in March 2020, soon after the Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization Bill was passed and the state was divided into two parts and converted into two union territories. The task of the commission was to redraw and delineate 7 additional seats to the 83-seat Legislative Assembly of Jammu and Kashmir. So it was already decided that 7 additional seats will be given. The question was, in which districts would the seat fall? Apart from this, the commission has also suggested reserving 7 seats for scheduled caste and 9 seats for the scheduled tribes, which is happening for the first time ever. This will be mainly for non-Kashmiri speaking Muslims. Although the commission has told the number of seats reserved for SC and ST, but they have not told which districts specifically will be reserved for SC and ST seats. This decision of the Delimitation Commission has led to quite a bit of unrest in the valley once again, where the local parties are alleging that the center government is trying to reduce their powers as much as possible. They have termed this decision as divisive and unacceptable. At the same time, the situation in Ladakh also is not very settled. We discussed just a couple of days back also that Ladakh is still demanding statehood and inclusion in the sixth schedule. In short, the two newest union territories of India are still not very satisfied with the status quo, and both of them are demanding changes which will suit their politics. Now, we have discussed about the concept of Delimitation Commission earlier also, how the Delimitation Commission is appointed by the President of India after every census following the Parliament passing the Delimitation Commission Act. However, we did not focus on the concept of delimitation specifically with regards to the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Also, those who are not sure what delimitation means, delimitation simply means that when the population of a state or an area changes after a few years, it increases or decreases. The number of seats in the parliament or in the assembly of that state should also change in proportion to that population. This process is called as delimitation. In Jammu and Kashmir specifically, the delimitation exercise has been different as compared to the other parts of the country. Till 2019 August, when Jammu and Kashmir was still a state in India, the delimitation process was pretty unique. For instance, the delimitation of Lok Sabha seats in Jammu and Kashmir was according to the Constitution of India. But delimitation of Jammu and Kashmir's assembly was according to the Jammu and Kashmir Constitution and Jammu and Kashmir Representation of People Act of 1957. The seats in the state assembly were delimited in 1963, 1973 and 1995. The last exercise in 1995 was conducted under the chairmanship of Justice K. Gupta when the state was still under the president rule. It was done on the basis of 1981 census. That is because there was no census in the state in 1991. After that, the state government passed a law freezing any more delimitations of seats in the state assembly until 2026, similar to what has happened with the Parliament of India. This freeze was upheld in the Supreme Court also. Now, after 2019, when the state was turned into a union territory, a delimitation commission was formed in March 2020 and headed by Justice Ranjana Desai. This commission has 5 members of Parliament of Jammu and Kashmir also working as associate members. Now, the process is important because this is what is required to have elections in the Assembly of Jammu and Kashmir. It will redraw the boundaries in such a way so that the population of the state is fairly divided. Now, before moving to the next article, let me tell you a pretty interesting fact. Justice Ranjana Desai, a retired judge of the Supreme Court, has been favored by the government for multiple important postings. For example, in 2018, the government of India had set up a search committee to appoint the first ever Lokpal in India. This search committee was given the responsibility to shortlist a few names and send those names to the selection committee, from which the selection committee will appoint a Lokpal. The head of this search committee for the Lokpal also was Justice Ranjana Desai, who is a retired judge of the Supreme Court. In March 2020, she became the head of the Delimitation Commission of India. She was the fifth women judge to be appointed in the Indian Supreme Court. Next article that we have talks about the rising prices of the LPG and how the government must control this rise in order to ensure that the success of the Ujjwala scheme is not rolled back now. The author here says that the Ujjwala scheme, ever since it was launched in the year 2016, has been a great success, and the numbers of various reports highlight that. And now, with the prices of the LPG refilling increasing, a lot of people, especially in the rural areas, are again letting go of their LPG cylinders and returning back to the solid fuel, which is a bad news for them, for the government, and as the country together. The author says that in the rural household, you usually see multiple cooking fuels used. There are firewood, there is coal, there are cow dung cakes, etc. And interestingly, all of them have a different application. For example, when people in the winter season have to go and take a bath, they warm their water using firewood. When they have to cook something for long periods, they use the coal for that. But after the government of India provided a free LPG cylinder connection, a lot of the rural households did make a shift towards the LPG cylinders, which helped them immensely. As you know, household pollution is one of the biggest health issues that we have in India and has led to death of lakhs and lakhs of people. In fact, well-renowned professors have talked about how giving LPG access to pregnant women can prevent them from falling ill and can ensure a good health of the fetus and of the mother itself. Multiple reports have linked the use of solid fuel for cooking to the health issues in India. The National Family Health Survey also has said that there was a higher prevalence of diseases such as tuberculosis in those households which were using solid fuels as compared to clean cooking fuels in most states. This problem was partially solved when the government introduced the Ujjwala scheme in the year 2016. In the 5 years of the scheme, the number of distributors of LPG cylinders increased from about 18,000 to 25,000, meaning that the distribution network for refilling of cylinders became much more vast, including in the rural areas of the country. Not just this, the data on the use of the LPG also suggests the effectiveness of the scheme. The author says that in the 5 years of the scheme, the average per capita consumption amongst the Ujjwala customers is about 3 cylinders per year, which even increased to over 4 cylinders when the government's Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana provided free refilling of the cylinders. This shows that the gap between Ujjwala customers and non-Ujjwala rural consumers is declining. So those who got free LPG cylinder connections take about 4 cylinders in a year, and those who are paying for their cylinder connections are using about 5 cylinders per year. So the data shows that the people who are given free cylinders are also coming at par with the other people, which is a very, very encouraging sign. It is also beneficial for India to meet its environmental goals since LPG has a zero global warming potential, and that is why it is not one of the greenhouse gases. Understanding the demand from the consumers to refill their cylinders, now the gas companies are also shifting their focus to reach out to low refill consumers. Ever since the government has successfully implemented the direct benefit transfer of the LPG, the government has more financial resources which are required for a large scale implementation of such a scheme where deposit free LPG connections are being provided. Not just this, to the credit of the government, after providing the free LPG cylinder connections, the government has also improved the availability of the LPG, the production of cylinders, pressure regulators, hose, and all the accessories which are required with the LPG cylinder connections are now easily available. A lot more new distributors and dealers are appointed, which ensure that refilling of gas cylinders is not a cumbersome process anymore. However, while all was going well, the changes that happened in the pandemic have the potential to derail the scheme. In the past 1.5 years, the prices of LPG have increased significantly, as a result of which a lot of rural households are going back to the usage of solid fuel. This is where the government needs to step up. The government needs to ensure that the people who have cow dung and other biomass can sell it to the government to be used in other purposes. For example, the government of Chhattisgarh has launched a very interesting scheme called Godhan Nyay Yojana, under which the government of Chhattisgarh procured cow dung from the farmers at a rate of rupees 2 per kg and used it in the power generation plants of the state. Such a scheme will help the farmers in having more money in their hands, which they can then use to refill the LPG cylinders and also take out cow dung from their households, which they would have otherwise used for cooking purposes. Such kind of an interesting scheme can also be emulated in other states also and at a national level as per the author. Now, you all are aware of the fact that the LPG prices have skyrocketed a lot in the past year and year and a half. Let's see why is it that the LPG prices are increasing at such a rapid pace. The price of LPG is usually decided based on the import parity price formula. It is based on a lot of factors, mainly the international product prices. The Saudi Arabia's company Aramco announces its contract prices on different fuels which are used for the calculation of the LPG prices. For example, apart from the prices offered by Saudi's Aramco, costs such as ocean freight charges, that is bringing LPG from Saudi Arabia to India, custom duties, port duties, local handling charges, bottling charges, etc. All of them combined will make up for the final LPG price. Apart from that, we also have to consider the currency fluctuations that may take place in the international market. Now, India's LPG mix is made up of 60% of butane and 40% of propane. Thus, the prices of LPG in India depend on these two components. Now, understand this. In March, Saudi Aramco said that the contract price of propane is $625 per metric ton, As of now, the price of propane is $870 per metric ton. Similarly, for butane, the price for which was $595 per metric ton in March, it is now $830. Not just this, the exchange rate, that is the number of rupee you have to pay to get $1, has also increased from 73.29 to over 75 rupees now. Because of this, government has been under immense financial pressure due to the LPG subsidy. That's why the government of India eliminated the subsidy on LPG when the international prices were increasing at such a rapid pace. In this year's budget, the government did announce that a budget for LPG subsidy is about 14,000 crore. That is why there was an assumption that the LPG subsidy would resume. And in certain cases, the LPG subsidy has resumed. The next write up from the Hindu newspaper focuses on a very interesting topic. That is your money that you have deposited in your banks insured by someone? That is, if your bank goes down, then what happens to the money that you have deposited? Is it insured or not? And also, is there a need for such an insurance? In short, the answer is yes. The money that you deposit in your bank is insured by an agency called DICGC, that is Deposit Insurance and Credit Guarantee Corporation. Earlier, the law was that if you have, let's assume, 5 lakh rupees in your account and the bank shuts down, the bank says that we don't have any money to give you. It was a responsibility of DICGC to give you back up to rupees 1 lakh. So every bank account was insured by up to rupees 1 lakh by the DICGC. However, the government of India recently increased this limit of 1 lakh to rupees 5 lakh. So now every bank account in a commercial bank in India is insured by up to rupees 5 lakh. Now, if you had only 2,000 rupees in your bank account, then it doesn't mean that you will get 5 lakh rupees back. If you had less than 5 lakh rupees in your account, you will get that back. But if you have more than 5 lakh rupees, even then you will get only rupees 5 lakh from the DICGC. The government of India recently passed a bill called the DICGC Amendment Bill of 2021 to make certain changes of how this process works. Now, this article here is in the form of an interview where two well renowned professors of finance and economics are giving their views about this entire system. The 1 lakh rupees limit for the DICGC was earlier set in the 1990s. There is a similar kind of system that exists in many other countries where the people's deposit in the banks are insured by a government agency. The limit of rupees 1 lakh that we used to have was much lower as compared to other countries. Even now, when we have increased this limit to rupees 5 lakh, still the limit remains very low compared to other economies around the world. However, this is required so that we can give confidence to the people to deposit their money in the banks. Worldwide, this system started in the 1930s after the Great Depression in the US, where a deposit insurance agency was set up. In India, the same was done in 1960s. However, as I said, the limit that we have given for insurance in Indian banks is much lower as compared to the international level. However, the other fact that you need to understand is in the history of India, it has never happened that the depositors have lost their money in a bank. Even in cases of banks which have been in trouble, such as a PMC bank, people's money did not disappear. Yes, there were restrictions that people were not allowed to take out money for some time, or they were only allowed to take out certain amount of money for certain time. But it has never happened that you deposited money in a bank and the bank told you that we can't give it back because we don't have your money. So this insurance scheme, many people say, is not really required, but still it gives a lot of confidence to those who choose to deposit money in the bank, and that is why the government must continue with it. The other reason why this agency may not be required is, if you see the track record of India, whenever any bank has become bad or whenever any bank is on the verge of bankruptcy, we see that the government always comes in and rescues the bank. This has happened with multiple banks till now. So there is a belief that if it comes to a bank failing, the agency will not be required to give the money because the government will anyways come in and rescue that particular bank. Now, how does this agency work, the DICGC? They are giving insurance to the bank. But why will the DICGC do so? They also have to earn some money in return. When you buy an insurance, you give a premium, right? That is why the insurance company sells you the policy. So, for taking the services of DICGC, every bank has to pay a premium to this agency. Now, this is where the problem lies. Every bank has to pay the same premium. Let me give you an example here, okay? Let's assume that there are two banks. There is one bank called the SBI that every one of you know, and then there is one other bank, let's say XYZ. Now, the XYZ bank knows that I already have insurance, so people are depositing their money. Even if I fail, even if I don't give back the money to the people, what is the worry? DICGC will come and give back the money, so I am free. So they work in such a way that they ask people to deposit more and more money. How? They tell the people, give us the money, we will give you 20% rate of interest. Now, 20% rate of interest in a saving bank account is unbelievable. So everyone will come to this bank only that we will deposit the money here. Now, XYZ will get a lot of money. They will try and give this money in the loan. And let's assume that the loan turns bad and they lose all the money. Then what will happen to the customers who deposited their money in the saving account? Nothing. DICGC will come and give everyone 5 lakh rupees back. The owners of the XYZ bank say, what happens? Let's open up a new bank. Let's now open up a bank called ABC and then do the same trick. On the other hand, SBI, who was a very disciplined child from the very beginning, did not party, did not do anything, said to its customers, if you deposit money in my account, I can only give you 4% rate of interest. Why? Because I don't want to lose your money. Imagine both these banks have to pay the same premium to DICGC. They are paying the same amount of premium to get their insurance, but SBI is being very careful so that they don't lose money. XYZ is not being careful because they are thinking that even if we lose the money, nothing will happen. Someone will save us. So the system here is wrong. The authors here say that rather than expecting the people to choose a better bank, rather than expecting that people should deposit their money in SBI and not XYZ, it is the RBI's responsibility to keep a check on such banks. You cannot have the same premium of all the banks. Because at the end of the day, even if the government comes in and helps to protect this XYZ bank, how is the government getting the money? At the end of the day, it is the taxpayers' money only. So it will eventually harm the people of the country and no one else. Thus, it is in the best interest of everyone that the premium of the bank should not be the same. It should be different depending upon their working and their risk factor. The banks which are following all the rules, which are not putting the money of their depositors in danger, should be allowed to give a smaller premium. The second problem highlighted in this particular article is that who will insure the insurer? Meaning that DICGC has said, okay, we will give money to the banks if something wrong happens. But who will give money to DICGC? For example, if all of a sudden 2 or 3 banks shut down and DICGC has to pay 5 lakh rupees to all its customers, who will then protect the DICGC at the end of the day? Now, this agency, that is a DICGC, is owned by the RBI. Indirectly, it is a government agency, so it becomes the responsibility of the government and the RBI that if something wrong happens in the DICGC, they come in and help them. In fact, if you look at the working of the DICGC, a lot of RBI officials work for them. Thus, the RBI should also be much more proactive in looking out for signs if a bank is about to fall down. Because if a bank falls down, the price has to be paid by the DICGC, which is owned by the RBI only. So rather than waiting for a bank to go bad, the RBI should look for signs of any crisis and make sure that the crisis is averted so that we don't reach a situation where the DICGC has to pay money to the people who have deposited their money in the bank. Now, let's also look at what exactly is this agency and how does it work. The DICGC, or the Deposit Insurance and the Credit Guarantee Corporation, was set up in 1978 by merging two existing organizations under an act of the Parliament. It serves as a deposit insurance and credit guarantee for the banks and is completely owned by the Reserve Bank of India. It covers all the banks, including regional rural banks, local area banks, foreign banks with branches in India, and cooperative banks. And it is compulsory for all these banks to take this insurance from the DICGC. The DICGC covers all the bank deposits, your savings account, your fixed deposit, your current account, recurring account, etc. However, there are some deposits which are not covered, such as deposits of the foreign governments in these banks, deposits of state and central governments, interbank deposit, that is, if one bank has deposit its money in some other bank, deposit of the state land development banks, deposit received outside India, or any deposit specifically exempted by the corporation with the approval of the RBI. Also, as I said, the law about the DICGC was recently changed by the government. Apart from increasing the limit of the insurance from 1 lakh rupees to 5 lakh rupees, the government made some other changes also. Now, what was the bill about? The bill covers 98.3% depositors in India and about more than 50% of the money that is deposited by the people. It covers all types of banks, including regional rural banks, cooperative banks, etc. Now, the one very interesting change is that earlier people were given their money by the DICGC up to rupees 1 lakh only after the bank was liquidated or restructured. But now the law says that people who have deposited money in the bank will get up to 5 lakh rupees within 90 days if the bank comes under RBI's moratorium. So the money given to the people would be much faster now. This increase in the limit from rupees 1 lakh to rupees 5 lakh was on the basis of the Damodaran Committee on Customer Services in Banks in 2011. The new process to be followed by the DICGC is, after the bank has been put on a moratorium by the RBI, within the first 45 days, the DICGC will collect all the information regarding deposit accounts, and in the next 45 days, it will review the information and repay the depositors within the next 90 days. Also, the premium to be paid by the banks to the DICGC has also been increased. Earlier, for every 100 rupees deposited in the bank, 10 paisa premium had to be paid to the DICGC. But now that has been increased to about 12 to 15 paisa per 100 rupees deposit in the bank. So, for example, if SBI has a total deposit of rupees 5 lakh right now, the premium that they used to pay for the DICGC would have been rupees 500, which is not a very small premium considering the large amounts of deposit that these banks hold. This has now been increased to cover the risk that the DICGC has. The next article is about Indian Foreign Secretary Shri Harshvardhan Shringla's visit to Myanmar and India's offer to play the mediator role between the political leadership of Myanmar and the Myanmar military in order to bring back democracy in the country. It is for the first time that the Indian government has hinted that we are ready to mediate between the various sides to end this ongoing crisis. Our foreign secretary also wanted to meet with Aung Suu Kyi, the famous Nobel laureate and the leader of Myanmar, but the military denied permission for any such meeting. Ever since the military coup took place in Myanmar in the month of February, Myanmar has faced sanctions from a lot of sides. The US imposed sanctions on Myanmar, and the Myanmar military leadership was also excluded from the ASEAN Summit of Leaders, saying that they are still committing violence against their own citizens and are not reverting to democracy. This is not the first time that the Myanmar military has taken over the country. When this happened earlier in the 1980s, India hosted a lot of democratic groups from Myanmar and also offered them shelter. Just like the last time, this time also, with the overtake of the military in Myanmar, India is now facing problems of narcotic and insurgent movements in the northeastern states, along with thousands of people rushing into India to seek refuge from Myanmar. Not just civilians, even the police personnel who are against the Myanmar military have come seeking refuge into India in states such as Mizoram. India shares one of its longest international borders with Myanmar of about 1700 kilometers, which runs along Arunachal Pradesh, Manipur, Nagaland, and Mizoram. Now, Myanmar has an unfortunate long history of military taking over the country's leadership and displacing the political leaders. In November 2020, after the parliamentary elections took place and Aung Suu Kyi's National League for Democracy party got a majority, the military did not accept the verdict. Now, the parliament in Myanmar is formed in such a way that the military holds 25% of the total seats which are reserved for them, and many important ministerial positions are also reserved for the military. After the military lost the election in November 2020, they imposed a state of emergency for 1 year and said that there was a major voting fraud in parliamentary elections and we will not accept this. Now, you might argue that India should have been opposed to the military of Myanmar and should not engage with them. But the fact is that India has its own national interest to look after, and that is why India has had continuous dialogues with the Myanmar military. For example, India's military diplomatic outreach to Myanmar is a very important aspect of our Act East policy. The Myanmar military also has been pretty good to India. They handed over 22 Indian insurgents who crossed the border into Myanmar. After which, India decided to continue with the sale of military hardware to Myanmar, including artillery guns, lightweight torpedoes, and naval gunboats. One of the first batches of vaccines that were exported from India also went to Myanmar, with about 15 lakh doses going to start the vaccination process in our neighboring state. Now, a part of the reason why we have been so warm to Myanmar and even the Myanmar military is because a lot of our interests are aligned with Myanmar. We see the country as a gateway to the East and to the ASEAN nations and have also made multiple investments, including the one at the Sitwe port. It is a part of the Kaladan multimodal project. Now, as you know, the mainland of India is connected with the northeast part through Siliguri corridor, which is a very narrow passage and can be very easily controlled by China. That is why India has always been looking for an alternate route to reach to the northeastern states in case it is required. And that is why India has been working on building the Kaladan multimodal project, according to which we will connect the Kolkata port with the Sitwe port here in Myanmar, through which we will gain access to the state of Mizoram in India. Not just this, India also needs the help of Myanmar military since militant groups such as the United National Liberation Front from the northeast part of the region have taken shelter in Myanmar. Since the border between the two nations is open for the local tribes, it leads to a lot of problem of illegal migration from one side to the other. India has invested over $1 billion in Myanmar right now, and this is much more than any other investment that we have made in any country of South Asia. India also, through the ONGC Videsh, made an investment of over $100 million in the Shiv oil and gas project in Myanmar. Thus, despite Myanmar not following the democratic values that we would like them to be, the interests of the two countries are aligned and India cannot turn a blind eye to what is happening in Myanmar right now. These are the articles we wanted to discuss from the Hindu newspaper today. Now, a couple of practice questions. Number one, what kind of data is captured in the National Family Health Survey? How can such data be helpful in government's policy making? Second, evaluate the significance of India-Myanmar relationship and its importance in ensuring peace in India's northeast region. Both these questions have to be answered within 250 words each. Thank you so much for watching the video.